We are told a simple story about ourselves, a story of progress. It begins in darkness, with humanity huddled in caves, chipping at stone. It moves, predictably, into the light. We discover bronze, then iron. We build villages, which become cities, which become empires. We invent the steam engine. We harness electricity. We split the atom, and we reach for the stars. It is a clean, linear, and comforting story. It confirms our place at the very pinnacle of human achievement. There is just one problem. The story is wrong. History is not a simple line. It is a vast, complex library, and entire sections have been torn out. The shelves are filled with artifacts that defy this neat progression. Objects that feel impossible. Glitches in the timeline. They are called out-of-place artifacts. OOPArts. These are the items that orthodoxy wishes to ignore. The anomalies that historians label as ritualistic, or the inconvenient evidence that archaeologists quietly lock away in museum basements. On this channel, in our exploration of zero-point lore, we have already investigated the king of all OOPArts, the Antikythera Mechanism, a 2,000-year-old analog computer of staggering complexity found in a Roman shipwreck, a machine that, by all rights, should not have existed for another 1,500 years. But the Antikythera Mechanism is not an exception. It is not a singular, brilliant anomaly. It is, instead, part of a global pattern. It is the first piece of a puzzle that hints at a vast, forgotten inheritance, a technological legacy left behind by a chapter of human history that has been almost entirely erased. Today, we are not just looking at one object. We are opening the archives. We are investigating 5 more pieces of impossible evidence that, when seen together, suggest our past is far more advanced, far more mysterious, and far more complex than we have ever been told. This is the Impossible Archive. Our first object comes not from a grand temple or a royal tomb, but from the dusty fields of Kujut Rabu, Iraq, in 1936. While digging the foundations for a new railway, workers unearthed a modest, 2,000-year-old Parthian village, and within its ruins, they found this. It's unassuming. A simple, 6-inch tall terracotta pot, sealed at the top with an asphalt plug. The official explanation was immediate and simple. It was a container for a sacred scroll. The contents, likely papyrus, had long since rotted away, leaving only the strange internal structure, because inside that pot was a cylinder of sheet copper. And suspended inside that copper cylinder, held in place by the asphalt plug, but not touching the copper, was an iron rod. This wasn't a scroll holder. This was a blueprint. Decades later, researchers recognized the design. When you fill this simple clay pot with an acidic liquid, something readily available in 200 BC, like vinegar or even grape juice, an electrochemical reaction occurs. The iron rod acts as the anode, the copper cylinder as the cathode. Electrons flow. This 2,000-year-old pot is a galvanic cell. It is, in every functional sense, a battery. When tested, replicas of the Baghdad Battery produce a steady, usable electric current, anywhere from 0.5 to 1 volts. Mainstream history tells us that electricity was discovered by Alessandro Volta in 1800. This artifact, and dozens like it found since, suggests we were beaten to the punch. By 2 millennia, the existence of the battery is one shock. The purpose of it is another. Why would an ancient culture need electricity? The first and most popular theory is electroplating, gilding. The Parthians were renowned for their fine jewelry. Using this battery, they could have easily electroplated silver objects with a micro-thin layer of gold or tin, a technique that requires only a low, steady current. This would explain the exquisite, uniform plating on artifacts that have puzzled metallurgists for decades. A second theory points to medicine. In this same time and place, the practice of acupuncture was known. It's theorized these batteries could have been used for a form of electroacupuncture, using the low, tingling current to block pain or treat ailments, a practice not dissimilar to modern TENS machines. A third theory is more theatrical. Priests, the keepers of knowledge, could have used these batteries in dimly lit temples to create magic. By wiring several batteries in series, they could create a significant charge, enough to light up a statue's eyes, or more likely, to give a non-believer a jolt, proving the power of the gods. Whichever theory you accept, the conclusion is the same. The Parthians, and likely their predecessors, understood the principles of electricity. And if they had electricity, what else did they have? This small, humble pot isn't just an anomaly. It's a spark. And that spark leads us directly into the dark, impossible corridors of Egypt. The Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt. It is one of the best preserved temple complexes in the world, a masterpiece of Ptolemaic art. Its ceilings are covered in stunning astronomical charts, its walls carved with hymns and rituals. But the most profound mystery of Dendera lies not in the sunlit halls, but in the dark, suffocating crypts beneath the temple floor. These subterranean corridors are long, narrow, and pitch black. Yet, their walls are covered in some of the most intricate and detailed relief carvings in all of Egypt. This presents a fundamental paradox. The soot problem. How did the ancient artists see their work? The official theory suggests they used a complex system of polished bronze mirrors to reflect sunlight down from the surface. But anyone who has tried this knows it's impractical. The light diminishes with every reflection, and in these winding, multi-angled corridors, it would be reduced to useless gloom within feet. The other option is fire, torches, oil lamps, but the ceilings of the Dendera crypts are pristine. They are completely, utterly, devoid of a single trace of soot. The oxygen in these cramped spaces would also be consumed in minutes, suffocating the artists. So, they worked in total darkness. Or they had another source of light, a source that was bright, portable, and produced no smoke. And on the walls of the crypt itself, the ancient Egyptians seem to have told us exactly what it was. What you are looking at is one of the most controversial carvings in history. The official explanation is purely symbolic. We are told this depicts the birth of the god Harsamtus, a serpent, the filament, emerging from a lotus flower, the socket, all contained within the bubble of the night sky or the womb of the goddess Nut. But to an engineer, or even just a modern eye, this is not a symbol. It looks, unequivocally, like a technical diagram. Let's break it down. We see a large, clear, pear-shaped object that looks exactly like a glass bulb. Inside, a filament, depicted as a wavy serpent. This filament extends from a socket made of a lotus flower. At the base of the socket, a cable runs to a rectangular box, which a figure holds. This box is seated upon a jade pillar, a common Egyptian symbol believed to represent stability. But in an electrical context, its stacked, ribbed design looks identical to a modern-day electrical insulator. The carving shows a giant, filament-based light bulb, connected by a cable to a power source, the box, which is grounded or stabilized by an insulator. This is not mythology. This is technology. When physicists and engineers have analyzed this, they noted it looks remarkably like a Crookes tube, an early form of gas discharge lamp. When the air is pumped out of such a bulb and a high voltage is applied, the trace gases inside glow, bathing the room in a cold, electric light. The soot problem vanishes. And where would they get the power? We just found the answer in Baghdad. While the Baghdad Battery itself is too weak, it establishes a principle. It proves the knowledge of electricity existed in the ancient world. The Dendera carving may be showing us its most advanced application, a sophisticated, soot-free, electric illumination system, reserved for the most sacred and secret work. From impossible light, we move to impossible knowledge. In 1929, a remarkable discovery was made during the cataloging of archives at the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, Turkey. It was a fragment of a map, drawn on gazelle skin, dated to the year 1513. It was signed by a Turkish admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis. The map is extraordinary for many reasons. It shows the coastlines of Europe, West Africa, and South America, with a precision that was, for 1513, astounding. It correctly plots the location of South America relative to Africa, something Christopher Columbus himself had failed to do only 21 years prior. But that is not the anomaly. The anomaly is at the very bottom of the map. The map clearly shows a landmass extending from the southern tip of South America, a landmass that we now know as Antarctica. This is impossible. Antarctica was not officially discovered, or even cited, until 1820, more than 300 years after this map was drawn. But the impossibility deepens. The Piri Reis Map doesn't just show Antarctica. It shows the coastline of Antarctica without ice. It depicts the bays, rivers, and mountain ranges of Queen Maud Land, an area of the continent that has been buried under a mile-thick sheet of ice for, at minimum, the last 6,000 years. The true shape of this subglacial coastline was completely unknown to humanity until it was mapped using ice-penetrating radar in 1958. Yet, Piri Reis, in 1513, drew it correctly. How? We don't have to guess. Piri Reis wrote the answer directly on the map itself. He stated that his map was not his own original work, but a compilation. He had used over 20 source maps, some of which, he claimed, dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, and others that were drawn in the most ancient times. This led the brilliant historian Professor Charles Hapgood to a radical, world-changing theory. The source maps Piri Reis used were not from the ancient Greeks or Egyptians. They were far, far older. Hapgood proposed they were the last surviving remnants of a forgotten, global maritime civilization, a people who possessed a mastery of navigation, cartography, and longitudinal science that rivaled our own, and who had mapped the entire globe, including Antarctica, before the end of the last ice age, when its coasts were free of ice. This map is not just a geographical curiosity. It is a message from a drowned world. It is the surviving intellectual property of a lost civilization, passed down through millennia, from survivor to survivor, until it was copied one last time by a Turkish admiral who had no idea what he was looking at. It suggests that our entire history of discovery is, in fact, merely a process of rediscovery. We are simply finding again what our ancestors already knew.
It suggests that our entire history.
Our next artifact moves from lost knowledge to lost time. It comes from the small town of London, Texas, in 1936. A local couple, the Hans, were walking along a creek bed when they noticed a peculiar-looking rock nodule. They took it home, where it sat for years. A decade later, their son broke it open with a hammer and chisel. Inside, they found this. It is an iron hammer of a surprisingly modern design. Its wooden handle, now partially petrified and coalified, is embedded along with it. The object itself is strange, but it's the rock it was found in that creates the paradox. Geologists who examined the stone matrix identified it as a concretion, a mass of hardened sedimentary rock, and the rock strata from which this concretion was pulled is dated to the Cretaceous period. That is over 140 million years ago. This is simply impossible. According to our established timeline, complex tool-making humans did not appear until 139.8 million years after this rock supposedly formed. Dinosaurs still roamed the Earth. So, what is the explanation? The official explanation, the one you will find on every skeptical website, is that the geological dating is wrong. They argue this is not Cretaceous rock, but a much younger concretion. The theory goes, a 19th century miner's hammer was dropped into a crevice. Over the course of just a few decades or centuries, water rich in dissolved limestone minerals, calcium carbonate, flowed over the hammer, hardening around it and encasing it in a new, fast-forming rock nodule. This process can happen. It would explain the modern hammer in what looks like ancient stone. Case closed.
It isn't.
A simple geological anomaly, except it isn't. In 1989, the artifact was subjected to metallurgical analysis at the Battelle Memorial Laboratory, a high-end research facility. The results from the hammerhead were baffling. The metal was found to be 96.6% iron, 2.6% chlorine, and 0.74% sulfur. This is not a 19th century alloy. In fact, it's not a standard alloy from any known period. It is almost pure iron, but the manufacturing process somehow introduced a high amount of chlorine, with no carbon, the key ingredient for modern steel. Even stranger? When a small notch was filed into the hammer in 1936, that spot has remained, to this day, completely free of rust. This strange chlorine-infused iron is somehow corrosion-resistant. The debunking of the London hammer only addresses the rock. It completely fails to address the metal. We are left with two impossible choices. Either a 19th century miner somehow forged a hammer using a lost, advanced metallurgical process that creates rust-proof iron, or the artifact is exactly what it looks like. A man-made tool, from a time before man was supposed to exist. Fused into rock by the pressure of impossible time. The London hammer is a paradox. It defies easy answers. It forces us to question which is more flawed, our understanding of geology or our understanding of history.
It forces us to question which is more flawed.
Our final objects are small, beautiful, and utterly bewildering. They come from the highlands of Colombia, left by the Quimbaya civilization, a culture that flourished roughly 1,500 years ago, well before the arrival of Europeans. They were masters of gold work. And among the thousands of artifacts they left behind, buried in tombs, are a few dozen small, gold trinkets, each only 2 or 3 inches long. For a century, archaeologists have labeled them zoomorphic. That is, they are stylized representations of animals, insects, birds, or maybe flying fish. But look at them, just look. These do not look like any animal that has ever lived. They look, with uncanny and specific detail, like modern aircraft. Let's analyze the design, not as art, but as engineering. They have a clear fuselage. They have wings, but not the wings of a bird. They are short, stubby, perfectly geometric delta wings. A design favored for high-speed, supersonic flight. They have a tail, and this is the most critical part. They have a single, high vertical stabilizer, like a rudder, and 2 horizontal stabilizers, like elevators. No bird, no insect, no fish, no creature in the biological kingdom has this specific combination of horizontal and vertical stabilizers on its tail. It is a design exclusively for aerodynamic flight control. But the final proof came not from archaeologists, but from aerospace engineers. In the 1,990 seconds, German aerospace engineers, convinced these were not insects, built scaled-up, radio-controlled models based exactly on the dimensions of these tiny gold artifacts. They equipped them with a simple propeller engine and a motor. They wanted to see if the design itself was sound. The result? They flew. Perfectly. The Quimbaya artifacts were not just aerodynamic. They were flawlessly aerodynamic. They handled high speeds, performed complex aerial maneuvers, and even glided perfectly with the power cut. These 1,500-year-old trinkets are, in fact, perfect models of high-performance aircraft. The Quimbaya were not carving insects. They were either observing or had inherited the knowledge of machines that could fly. These are not just OOPArts. They are echoes of a lost science, a mastery of aerodynamics that we are not supposed to have invented until the 20th century. So, what do we do with this evidence? What does this impossible archive tell us? We have seen evidence of ancient electricity, from the simple spark of the Baghdad Battery to the sophisticated, industrial light of the Dendera crypts. We have seen evidence of impossible knowledge. A 16th century map that depicts a world only mappable with 20th century radar, copied from sources lost in the fog of prehistory. We have seen an object that defies time itself. A modern tool, with inexplicable metallurgy, locked inside 140-million-year-old rock. And we have seen perfect models of flying machines, left by a culture that should have known nothing of aerodynamics. These are not isolated cases. These are not hoaxes. When you add these artifacts to the Antikythera Mechanism, when you place them alongside the machine-like precision of Puma Punku, the astronomical genius of Göbekli Tepe, or the sheer scale of Baalbek, a new picture of our past begins to emerge. These objects are what I call technological echoes. They are the fragmented hardware of a lost software, a global body of scientific knowledge that once existed on this planet. This is not the story of aliens. This is the story of humans. A sophisticated, intelligent, and technologically advanced human civilization that existed deep in our past. A civilization that understood electricity, that mastered global navigation, that understood metallurgy and aerodynamics, and that was wiped from the face of the earth by a global cataclysm, like the Younger Dryas climate event 12,000 800 years ago. All that survived were the echoes, the stories that became our myths of a golden age and a great flood. And these impossible objects, the surviving, indestructible fragments of their world, rediscovered by us, their inheritors. Thousands of years later, we have been taught that history is a straight line, pulling us up from primitive beginnings. But the evidence in the impossible archive shows us the truth. History is not a line. It is a cycle. We are not the first. We are just the first, in this cycle, to find the evidence of the ones who came before.